Hello, and welcome back to It's a Very Exciting Time, a podcast by a UFO nerd and his tolerant friend. My name is Scott, and I've been fascinated by the phenomenon my whole life.
And I'm Chuck. I'm an aerospace nerd and a tolerant friend.
We started this podcast because since 2017, there have been shocking revelations, from news of secret Pentagon programs to confirmed videos of astonishing craft. In a nutshell, now that we know the government has recovered non-human technology.
Or at least we will, once we catch one of those Jersey drones.
It raises a natural question. If UFOs are real, what else? Suddenly, some of these other parts of the phenomenon that seemed unlikely are pulled into the realm of the possible.
And they may still be unlikely, but even if it's new science and not aliens, woo!
It's a very exciting time.
It is. And just a quick reminder before we get into everything, if you want to support what we do here, the best way is by joining our Patreon at patreon.com/veryexcitingtime or our Discord, which you can find at veryexcitingtime.com.
Mm-hmm. Chuck, you may remember back in March, we put up an episode called Mysterious Drone Swarms, Navy Ships and Air Force Bases, which discussed some odd drone swarms that were targeting military facility.
Mm-hmm.
The drones remained unidentified, and although some of them were described as quadcopters, many of them were just bright lights in the sky exhibiting what you would describe as unusual flight characteristics for drones. These are maybe not rising to the level of the 5 observables, but they had shockingly long range flight times. They were resistant to counter drone measures, stuff like that.
Yeah. I do remember that. It was a weird episode. It was a fun one. Still think it's probably not aliens, but the tech was definitely interesting.
That's fair. Well, guess what? The drones are back, baby.
All right.
It's been literally all anyone in the UFO community has been talking about since Thanksgiving, which, to be clear, is really unusual. The UFO community is like a room full of hyperactive toddlers who are just like about to get prescribed ADD meds. They cannot focus to save their lives. So if something sticks for a day or two, that's usually a sign that it's going to be something we're going to talk about in an episode. This has been 2 straight weeks. All anybody has been talking about is drones.
Man. It's definitely been that way in the Discord too. So I'm excited to get a deeper dig into it than what I've like. I don't read a lot of the Discord, but so I'm excited to spend some time and actually get into it with you.
Yeah. So I'm going to talk about the new stuff, but before we do, I want to go back and talk about a weirdly similar event that happened in 2019.
Okay.
So this is a quote from the War Zone. Said, in late December 2019, the War Zone reported on fleets of unidentified drones operating in the airspace above northeastern Colorado and western Nebraska. There was a sense of near panic as law enforcement agencies were inundated with scores of reports of these drones, prompting the creation of a task force that included the FAA, federal law enforcement agencies like the FBI, and sheriffs from multiple Colorado counties. Eventually, the state of Colorado sent one of its well-equipped surveillance planes to hunt for the drones. And despite the large effort and the mobilization of the Colorado's infrared camera-equipped aircraft, nothing conclusive was identified, and to date, no one has come forward to claim responsibility for the drone activities.
Well, this just answered some questions I have later in the podcast about infrared. Okay. Huh. So they haven't figured out who's behind it.
Yeah, that'll actually be a running theme tonight.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
On January 17th, so just a little bit after this, the Air Force released a press statement. They said, "We can confirm that the drones spotted in Colorado and Nebraska are not from F.E. Warren Air Force Base and are not affiliated in any way with the United States Air Force. We've provided this information to the FAA, FBI, and state and local authorities as they investigate this matter. The drones have not posed a threat to any of our sites, facilities, or operations."
Well, I mean, Air Force has been tremendously and notably transparent on the issue of UAP, so this makes me feel like just a swelling of trust.
Just real straight shooters by the books.
Really?
You always know what you've got with the Air Force. According to The Hill, the sheriff of Washington County, Colorado, was one of many law enforcement officials who observed the objects. Importantly, he could not confirm what he saw was drone activity because he could not hear a noise from the motor. In another incident, internal FAA emails describe an object flying low, but no engine propeller noise could be heard. One of the unknown objects also passed just 200 feet over a Kansas Highway Patrol officer. Somehow, the brightly lit craft made absolutely no sound at all, even though the wind was calm. Yet another witness, a retired meteorologist, heard no sound as one of the objects hovered alarmingly over a nuclear missile command station within sight of his farm.
Just so, like, I come from Colorado, and I had never heard of Washington County, so I had to look it up, and it is the middle of nowhere. There's nothing. I didn't even find like a town in that county. I'm sure there is, but yeah, it's kind of.
We've got one listener out there right now who's writing you a very angry YouTube comment.
Right, exactly. This is the one I'm going to go down for.
That's right.
So okay, so this is really interesting. Like the multiple reports of silent drones is weird. Like, I think everyone knows that drones are loud, and especially like, as you know, the small ones have that really high pitched whine, but the big ones have the like helicopter noise. So for it to be silent really up levels the cost of it, but it's not impossible.
Sure.
Without derailing too far into the how, my quick research said that there is evidence of multiple state level actors who are working on or already have stealth and near silent drones. So still in the right range.
Yeah, you're kind of tipping our hand a little bit for later on when we're going to talk about like who might be behind this. But if there's kind of one through line in my research here, it's that there's no silver bullet here that's like, oh yeah, this is obviously non-human. So it makes it a weird topic for a UFO show. This is just part of why I've hesitated to do another episode.
Sure, yeah.
But there are also a number of oddities about these that make me hesitate to say, oh, it's definitely Russian or Chinese. There's, I would say, there's plenty of evidence, I would say, that these are not like hobbyist drones. These are not like commercial drones that someone's just buying. And we'll talk about why later.
Yeah.
As you said, it's always possible that this is some next gen super drone that someone has made. Nothing here necessarily looks impossible for humans to do. But there's a lot of oddness, a lot of unexplained features. The silence is one of them. We'll talk about some other things later. And it adds up to a big pattern that's like, okay, if these are human made, someone hasn't just leapfrogged the current tech. They're miles beyond what anyone else is doing right now.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I'm eager to hear the weight of evidence with silent and large. I'm still like, okay, it's possible.
No, for sure. And again,
so
to be clear,
let's keep
I'm not trying to push you towards aliens. I don't think there is enough evidence to say it's aliens.
Aren't you?
But they're weird. And they're weird enough that I get a little annoyed when I see Congress people just kind of like brushing it off. It's like, they're just drones. Like it's
Yeah.
probably some kid. Like,
Yeah.
no, there's
You should
something
learn
more
some more.
here, buddy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, switching back to the Hill, they said these objects often displayed bright, flashing white, red, and green lights, which is normal for flying craft, but they were not consistent with standard aircraft signal light patterns. These silent, flashing objects flew only at night. The flashing lights, it should be noted, would be odd if the incidents involved any kind of foreign intelligence gathering operation.
Yeah. It is odd. Like if you're going to put lights on the drone, it doesn't make sense to not follow the standards. Unless it's a sort of sleight of hand thing. Like, hey, look over here at all the pretty lights. Don't pay attention to the other 20 drones that are taking photos of this building over here. Oh, and our green and red lights are backwards, so you think it's going that way when it's actually coming this way.
Sure.
Like,
yeah, I sent up 20 stealth drones and one drone with a disco ball.
yeah, exactly. Like that's how you're going to do it.
That's fair. All right. The Hill says some of these objects reportedly flew in adverse weather conditions, including hovering in winds of 30 miles per hour with 40 plus miles per hour gusts. Yeah. A briefing document prepared for the FAA administrator noted that sheriffs from several Colorado counties reported that the objects flew for several hours at a time in less than optimum flying conditions, high winds, and storm-like conditions. By flying against or hovering in strong winds for long durations and emitting no discernible sound, the objects exhibited unique capabilities inconsistent with conventional drone technology.
Sure. Yeah. Like I've definitely, when I've flown my drones, like I have a 2-pound helicopter, and that thing does not do well in 30-mile-an-hour winds, but it does a hell of a lot better than my like 250-gram one. And so like,
sure,
it's really a factor of mass in my limited experience.
But then you've also got the trade-off, right? The bigger it is, the less it's going to be affected by winds, but the more thrust it needs, which makes the silent part even weirder. But yeah, anyway.
In some ways. But so like this is one of the things where it feels advanced, but not so advanced that it has to be aliens. So if it is human, I would love to know who finally cracked plasma propulsion, or if it's actually like more mundane than that. Because that's like one of the big things we're looking at for silent quads is plasma propulsion, which is damn cool.
That's a wild.
Yeah, right? Yeah, it's like the same stuff you use on a satellite, but we're building atmospheric versions.
That's really weird. All right. Yeah. Going back to the Hill, they said, perhaps most perplexingly, FAA emails note that there are several reports, you're going to like this, that the drones are operating in coordination with a, quote, big drone that may be stationary in the area. This larger object, according to the emails, also described as a mothership, is said to hover while all the others around fly in close proximity. In one bizarre incident, a Nebraska deputy sheriff reported observing 30 to 50 objects flying independently of each other, with a larger mothership hovering for hours.
This makes so much sense to me. Like, I love it. I'm delighted by this. Like, it's super fun, and it goes a long way of answering, like, my biggest question of how are you trucking everything out there? Without a mom, which, sorry, you'd have to have an aircraft carrier, like, next door. But with a mothership, you can absolutely do, like, a fuel cell hybrid. Sure. And keep that thing up for 5 hours. Its job, stay up there, recharge everything, take them all home. You can fly those for a real long time.
Sure.
In my research, I didn't find any evidence of Russia or China having stealth hovering drones, though.
Right.
And so
this is important.
Really
we touched on this a little bit in the last episode. Lou Elizondo kind of broke it down like this. He's like, look, with drones, you either have fixed wing drones that have the ability to go really fast and really far and really high,
Yep.
but they can't do a good job of staying in one place and monitoring one spot. They're going to do
Right.
flyovers. Or you have drones that are really good at hovering in one spot and staying in place for a while, but they can't do it for a really long time and they can't go very far.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of an inverse thing. You get one or the other. What we're seeing with these drones is somebody seems to have cracked the ability to do both.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about this later when we get to New Jersey. A lot of people are describing these as fixed wing drones, but they're hovering. They are behaving
Interesting.
very strangely for fixed wing drones.
Yeah.
And going back to what you were saying about the mothership, I love that you immediately went into engineer mode and like, oh, here's how I would make that work. There's an element here that you're missing, though, which is a drone big enough to carry a fleet of 50 other drones and stay
Mm-hmm.
in the air for hours is going to be visible on radar. It's going to be trackable. People are going to be able to see where it came from and
Right.
where it
Yeah.
goes. And that's the other element that's happening here is nobody knows where these things came from or where they went after they were done flying overhead. They just disappear, which is very puzzling.
But like there is a company in China that makes a tilting wing. What is that called? A
VTOL.
tilt rotor. A VTOL. VTOL UAV that's about the size of an SUV. And if it's tilt rotor, but
sure,
we don't. While we do have photos of it with wrapping paper that looks like the Chinese military, we don't have any evidence of it being stealthified or radar resistant or
we're kind of hitting this point over and over, but I think it's really important to nail any individual detail that we hear is probably achievable by either current tech or like near
future
leap tech. Like you could imagine a military program has done this, but to get every single box checked is a big leap.
Hard.
And I don't think people really understand how challenging it is to get all of these things in one package. And when someone's like, oh yeah, it's definitely a military package, like maybe, but we should be worried about that too, because that means somebody figured out how to make a like bomber sized thing that can stay up indefinitely and is undetectable. And that's real concerning, whether it's us or them.
I mean, I was legitimately surprised to read about all the like Chinese UAVs, or they called them UCAVs because they're combat. But they have a supersonic one that's capable of super high flight. They have multiple. You're absolutely right. Like if they have this and it's stealth, like it can carry so many other problems. Not to mention all those little drones could be there.
Right. We're such nerds. We keep getting fixated on the details. Let's get back to this because I got a lot tonight, buddy.
It's going to be a long one.
So coming back to the Hill, they said, notably, an FAA spokesman who flew from LA to assist with the investigation declined to confirm that the objects were drones. In an email, then FAA Administrator Steve Dickinson noted that not too long ago, we would have called these UFOs. His chief of staff responded, yep, everything now is a drone. Journalist Ross Coulthart, who we love, we quote him all the time, said, it is becoming increasingly clear that the U.S. Air Force and sections of the Department of Defense are using supposed drones or balloons to implausibly attempt to explain away recent UAP sightings.
Yeah, I mean, after all, Aero doesn't cover UAVs and UASs, so...
Yes. It's a real easy way to get a bunch of stuff off your desk. Call it a drone. Right. We don't do drones.
Well, drones, we don't do that.
All right. So yeah, that was the weird sightings in Colorado and Nebraska. I mention it because, as we'll get to the current round of sightings, it is almost a direct parallel. So that was back in 2019. It happened. It went away. It's in the
Okay.
middle of nowhere, as you mentioned. Very strange. But
Yeah.
nobody really thought too much about it. Honestly, I didn't hear about it until someone recently brought up the parallels with the current sightings.
Yeah.
More recently, back when we did our previous episode, we were mostly talking about the drones that were harassing Navy ships out at sea because,
Right.
frankly, it was a weirder story.
Hmm.
These ships were miles off coast and there were no surrounding ships in the area. So
Yeah.
these drones had to come from somewhere. So we immediately had a range problem, which we talked a lot
Right.
about. But at the time, there was also an incident where Langley Air Force Base was being harassed by swarms of drones. And we talked about this a little bit, but frankly, there wasn't a lot of detail at the time. And it was just kind of weird. Like, it's an Air Force base. Like, of all the places on the planet you would expect to have a handle on air defenses, it would be an Air Force base. And
Yeah.
it was just kind of weird that they didn't.
Yeah.
Former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence and oldest fan of the show, Chris UFO Daddy Mellon, put it recently. He said, unbeknownst to the general public, unmanned aerial vehicles, or drones, and UAP are already disrupting major military activities, not just overseas, but stateside. For example, in December of 2023, operations at Langley Air Force Base were disrupted for weeks by unidentified UAV. The impact was so disruptive that I understand an entire fighter squadron was relocated from the base to Naval Air Station Oceana in Virginia. Similar incidents in recent years have occurred at Anderson Air Force Base in Guam, various military training ranges off the East Coast, Palo Verde, and other nuclear power plants in Colorado, over a number of U.S. warships underway at sea and elsewhere.
I um I had totally missed that they moved the squadron of fighters out of the base so that they could launch them if they needed to. Like, that's really interesting to see how serious the military is taking it.
Well, and it gets back to the flight safety risk we've talked about all the time, right? Like, ignore whether they're non-human or not. These things are in the air. They're where they're not supposed to be, and they're a danger to pilots who are taking off and landing. In fact, Liberation Times reported recently that the incursions extended beyond December of 2023. They said in January of 2024, an F-22 nearly collided with an unidentified object over Joint Base Langley Eustis, forcing the F-22 to alter its flight path.
Huh. Yeah. Was this in Arrow's report by any chance?
No, Arrow doesn't deal with drones.
Yeah, right. Yeah, checks out.
Air Force General Mark Kelly told the Wall Street Journal that at least one of the Langley drones was, quote, roughly 20 feet long and flying at more than 100 miles an hour at an altitude of roughly 3,000 to 4,000 feet. Other drones followed, one by one, sounding in the distance like a parade of lawnmowers.
That's interesting. So 4,000 feet is interesting to me. The max height for like civilian drones is 400 feet. So seems like good evidence that we're dealing with like aliens or state military. But also it's interesting that it's not quiet.
Military drones go a lot higher than that, right? Military drones go to any flight range that we can hit with any other type of aircraft. So 400 feet is just the civilian height. Drones are certainly capable of going higher.
Yeah, even commercial drones are capable of going higher. It's just they're requested not to. But these aren't silent. What's the difference?
Yeah, so not all of them are silent. We do hear about rotor noise, and you'll hear about that more later. I think this is part of why people are so comfortable saying these are drones. They immediately go, oh, you can hear them. They must be quadcopters. But again, the way they behave is very unusual for our existing understanding of conventional drones, such as quadcopters or fixed-wing drones. These don't really behave like either of them. So somebody has done something here, and as we said, may not be aliens, it may be a leap, but it's not like a little leap. Like, oh yeah, this is just like next year's model. This is kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
Senator Mark Kelly this year in April said, the drone problem, incursions on military installations, have gone up, and it's a real threat to our national security. In December, we saw a large number of drone incidents at Langley, and we still don't know who was behind those. We see consistent incursions around sensitive government facilities.
That's consistent incursions is not generally the phrase I want to hear about military bases.
No, controlled airspace should not have consistent incursions. I don't even want infrequent incursions, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the thing that is perhaps more notable there is we still don't know who was behind those. This is Mark Kelly talking in April. This is 4 months later. There is no world in which unidentified objects overflew an Air Force base for weeks at a time to the point where it impacted flight safety, nearly hit a jet, and they had to relocate a fighter wing. And they weren't taking this incredibly seriously, trying to down the drones, trying to interfere with them, trying to track them, trying to figure out where they were. And in April, they're like, yeah, we still have no idea who that was. That's real alarming.
Yeah, it's wild. So I just I asked the internet like how much should sound attenuate over the course of 3,000 feet, and it's like 70 decibels.
Yeah.
So if people are hearing it, like those are not stealth at all.
No,
like that's
not
helicopter.
Yeah. So this brings us to the present day, more accurately to Thanksgiving. In November of 2024, there have been a bunch of drone swarms around RAF bases in the UK. Liberation Times reported small unmanned aerial systems were spotted in the vicinity of and over Royal Air Force Lakenheath, RAF Mildenhall, and RAF Feltwell between November 20th and November 24th. The number of systems fluctuated, and they ranged in size and configuration. The small unmanned aerial systems were actively monitored, and installation leaders determined that none of the incursions impacted base residents, facilities, or assets.
I mean, no impact sounds good. Any idea why they targeted those Air Force bases in particular?
Well, the BBC says RAF Lakenheath was being prepared to potentially house U.S. nuclear bombs after those weapons were removed from the UK back in 2008.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that would do it. Okay.
Yeah. I was unable to confirm whether the bombs are there now or whether this is a planned move, but the Washington Examiner seems to think that they are there. They said RAF Lakenheath hosts 2 F-15E and 2 F-35A fighter squadrons, and also a forward storage facility for U.S. B-61 nuclear bombs. That makes it a high-value concern for NATO and a possible target for Russia.
Yeah. But hey, no impact from possible foreign spy drones over the base where we keep all the nukes. Like, it's fine. Everything's fine here.
Don't worry about it, guys. Liberation Times reported plane spotters monitoring U.S. Air Force activities from the affected bases observed Air Force assets deploying apparent countermeasures.
Yeah, I bet they sure did.
One YouTuber filming from outside RAF Lakenheath in Suffolk stated that he could see lights of apparent drones skimming the tops of trees near the base, and that F-15s had been taken off and were going round and round above us.
What? F-15s? What are they going to do against drones, except maybe the big one?
Yeah, it's a real question. If we were talking fixed wing, long range, fast moving, high flying drones, sure, scrambling a fighter jet makes sense. But this gets back to, I don't know if you remember when they shot down the Chinese spy balloon and those 3 other weird balloons that were maybe hobbyists. They shot missiles at those things. Now, they didn't explode the missiles. They were using the missiles as kinetic devices, but like, it kind of highlighted that our jets are not really equipped to target a small, slow-moving object. Like, that's not
Yeah.
really how they're built. So I got to assume if they're scrambling F-15s against what is being described as a small hovering drone, it's like a deterrent, because I can't
Hmm.
imagine those jets are being used to take down drones. You're not getting in a dogfight over Suffolk. Like,
Yeah.
you're just
Right.
not.
Yeah.
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 So very
That
strange.
is interesting. I looking it up quickly, the F-15 does have a very low stall speed, so maybe it has an envelope that allows them to like kind of swing through. But um,
Maybe.
also
It feels
regarding
like a
the
stretch to me, but I'll admit
yeah
I'm not a pilot.
regarding the missile though, there was a damn good reason for that.
Go
The
on.
the balloon that was at 100,000 feet was
Mhm.
40,000 feet out of the operating envelope of the F-22. Like they had
Fair.
to use a missile. There's no way to get it otherwise.
Yeah. Chris Sharp, who is the primary journalist at Liberation Times, eventually gave up on publishing articles. He was putting out a new article every day with the new info, and eventually he
Sure.
was just like, yo, I'm on Twitter.
Yeah.
So he started posting updates because he's in the area. He said, there are local residents around the base who tell me they are worried. They
Mhm.
know the bases are on high alert and they can see the heightened police presence.
Yeah, I would be too. Like I don't
Yeah.
worry about the hurricanes as much. I kind of would worry about like missiles flying overhead. Like I don't know.
Yeah. And the thing that I think is notable here is he was saying things like the RAF is trying to spike this story. And
Hmm.
what I interpreted that to mean is the RAF is being very clear, like, there's nothing to see here. There's no danger. There's no
Ah,
threat. There's just drones. We're trying to figure out who they are, but everybody relax. But then what the locals are seeing is the bases are on alert. F-15s are being scrambled.
yeah.
And Chris Sharp says there is a notice to air missions for multiple military aircraft to operate without lights out of Lakenheath until December 4th.
Huh. I wonder why.
It's unclear. Maybe
Okay.
to avoid confusion with the drones, which are reported
Yeah.
as having very bright lights. But like, all of this adds up to the public statement is nothing to see here, nothing to worry about. Their behavior does not align with that at all.
Right.
Sending up a notice that, hey, we're going to be flying unmarked, unlit jets over the city for the
At
next 2
night.
weeks. That's not nothing to see here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Chris Sharp quotes a witness. He says, currently flying over Brandon, Suffolk, and moving around in a large circle back and forth from base at varying altitude. They started with white lights. Sorry, he's talking about drones here, not the
Ah,
jets.
okay.
Started with white lights, then moved into solid red lights, and then onto green and red lights. Sound can be heard when directly overhead that sounds like a dull humming engine, but almost definitely not a jet engine of any kind.
I keep waiting for this to all end up being a massive Shaggy Dog joke with all the red and green twinkling lights. Like, it was Santa all along.
Ho, ho, ho. One resident heard.
Yes. Yes. Perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know, man. It's weird, right? And he makes a big deal out of it's not a jet engine, but
Mm,
again, that's what you would expect from a fixed wing, high flight, fast mover, not a hovering one. So everything we're hearing about these is very strange. Like, people are going out of their way to point out that they don't behave like jets, but I wouldn't expect them to behave like jets, which makes me
yeah.
wonder why they're pointing out that they're not jets. Like, what am I
Yeah.
missing here?
Yeah.
Um, Liberation Times again talked about the high winds in the area and the drone's ability to deal with that. It said with wind speeds reaching up to 65 miles per hour in the area over the weekend, operating drones in such conditions would have been challenging.
Okay. Actually, 65 miles an hour is a big deal. Like,
Yeah.
that is extremely challenging. So, I mean, it sounds like even the smaller drones, the non-mothership drones, must be pretty heavy. Which I don't know. That's really
I also
interesting.
don't know what it means when they say small drones, right? Like, what is the
Yeah.
cutoff here? Because to tip my hand a little bit, when
Smaller
we
than a
talk about
mothership.
Jersey, they describe them as car sized.
Yeah.
So are they saying small in the sense that it's not like a 737? It's not like an
Mm.
F-15? Or like, are they trying to say it's like a consumer drone? Like, small is a very ambiguous word here. So
Yeah.
I think
I
you
thought
kind
it
of hit
was
the nail
the
on the head. Sorry,
I
go
thought it
ahead.
was only the mothership that was like SUV sized. Is that
We'll get to that later.
okay?
In the other story, yes, the mothership was big, the other drones were smaller.
Oh, okay.
In the later case, we're dealing with bigger drones.
Oh,
But
okay.
I think the thing to hammer on is what you were saying, which is there's a trade-off here between weight and stability. So if you can make a bigger, heavier drone, it's gonna handle bigger winds better.
Yeah.
But it's also heavier and louder and harder to fly. And now you're dealing with battery life issues. And how are these things staying up for hours if they're the size of a car? You know, like
Yeah.
these are all engineering challenges that may be solvable, but are a tricky combination of features that, as far as we know, don't exist in this particular configuration. Chris Sharp goes on to say, drone activity like this takes a lot of coordination and sophistication. To evade UK and US forces for 7 nights in a row, later more than that, and through a huge storm is certainly not easy. So my guess is that the operators and technology are advanced. It reminds me of Langley all over again.
Yeah. I still like this is still the weirdest thing to me. Like why can't they track it?
Absolutely. Yeah, and we're
Yeah.
going to talk more about that later. That I think is a
Sure.
really key component of this, because it's easy for any engineer to plausibly think up how you could make a drone that works like this, or at least does some of the things. But the fact that they have not been able to track them, I don't think anybody has an answer for that. That's very, very weird.
Yeah.
A Twitter account called UAP News said a U.S. official speaking on the condition of anonymity said it did not appear that the drones were the work of hobbyists and appeared to be coordinated, but added that the U.S. military would continue to investigate. And BBC confirmed that. They said defense sources have told the BBC that suspicion had fallen on a state actor being responsible for the incursions.
Yeah. Of course. I mean, okay. So a state actor meaning like foreign adversary, like
Yeah, like Russia or China or something.
or ducks.
Do ducks have a state?
Yeah, of course they do. It is not well known, but many ducks hold citizenship in Turkey.
God damn it, Chuck. Moving right along.
I've been waiting for hours to deliver that joke.
So yeah, we've got these drone swarms in 2019 in the Colorado region. We've got drone swarms over Langley Air Force Base last year. We've got drone swarms over RAF bases in the UK, where the US Air Force is storing nuclear bombs. And then, happening right now, ongoing as we speak, I literally had to update my show notes this morning. We've got drone swarms over New Jersey. The war zone says the U.S. Army's Picatinny Arsenal in northern New Jersey is working with local, state, and federal partners to obtain more information about mysterious drone activity over the facility and in the surrounding area.
Why would they spy on New Jersey? What do they do at Picatinny Arsenal?
Well, I looked it up. Picatinny
Okay.
Arsenal is a military research and manufacturing facility that develops and produces weapons, munition, armor systems, and explosive ordnance disposal technology for the U.S. Armed Forces.
Okay. Yeah. That sounds scary and awkward.
And probably worth monitoring. Yeah.
Yeah, probably.
If I'm a foreign state, where do they develop their weapons? Might be worth peeking in there.
Yeah, let's.
But notably, unlike the previous things, it's not just military facilities this time. According to NewJersey.com, NJ.com, I should say, for weeks, drones have been flying at night over New Jersey, sometimes traveling in groups, leaving residents frustrated at the lack of information. Nancy Reed said that she has been seeing groups of drones for long periods of time between 8 and 10 p.m. Quote, one is stationary, the others are in and out of the tree line. It's strange. They're out there for hours and never during the day. Another resident, Mike Walsh, first heard the drones overhead on November 18th. He has seen them daily since. He estimated the larger ones were the size of a car. One night he drove over to a ridge where he counted 8 drones flying at once.
So this makes me wonder if, like, this has been going on for weeks. Has it actually been going on continuously since 2019 and nobody noticed because they didn't have the lights on? Like,
maybe. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. There's some good questions to be answered here. And, assuming that the drone operators were in Colorado in 2019 and Langley last year and New Jersey and UK now, what were they doing between those incidents?
Yeah,
Did
right.
they stop flying, or were they just somewhere that we're not getting reports from? Yeah.
Apparently they're adding stealth technology to it.
Yeah, right. Now, so yeah, as I mentioned, the weird thing is it turns out these drones showed up in New Jersey before Thanksgiving, and they have been out there every night since.
That's wild. Every single night?
Well, except for Thanksgiving.
Really? That's so weird.
It's super weird, right? Well, did they take Thanksgiving off?
Like, was that like a protest by the is this all a response to the mass bird murders perpetrated by Americans on #NoThanksgiving?
Yes. If it is ducks, we can assume that it is probably something to do with Thanksgiving.
It's turkey related. Yeah.
Counterpoint, the drone operators have a really good union and they refuse to work on holidays.
That's true. Either that or they did show up, but nobody noticed because the radar operators were all at home.
There you go. Yeah. NBC anchor Hallie Jackson, after hearing a report about this, was literally laughing. And she's like, this is so bizarre. So you're telling me the TLDR is large drones fly over towns all night in the middle of the night and nobody knows where they're from? And the guy who was giving her the report was like, yeah, basically.
Yeah. God, just when I thought that like this felt like military surveillance and now it's like spilling out into civilian. It was very weird.
It's very weird. Yeah. I was kind of like you when we heard they were targeting Navy ships and they were targeting Air Force bases. Like, obviously, somebody is interested in the military. Maybe it's aliens, but like, it's probably Russia. Like, yeah, let's be real. But why are they flying over like residential neighborhoods? Like, what is the intel?
Yeah.
Offered in residential New Jersey? I don't know, man.
Yeah, I don't know.
There has been quite a lot of attention on this, and I want to kind of emphasize this. All of the previous stories are things I heard about in the UFO community. They didn't really penetrate the mainstream news. The New Jersey story is out there, buddy. I am hearing about it from people who are definitely not UFO people. Like a woman that I follow in the web dev community who lives in New Jersey was like, yo, what's up with all these drones? Like the freaking New York Times wrote about it, which, they're extremely resistant to talk about UFO stuff after 2017. So
nowadays,
very strange event and getting a lot of attention. Perhaps most notably coming from government attention. So Governor Phil Murphy said on December 4th, I convened a briefing with Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas, senior officials from the DHS, New Jersey State Police, and members of our congressional delegation to discuss reported drone activity over parts of North and Central New Jersey. We are actively monitoring the situation and in close coordination with our federal and law enforcement partners on this matter. There is no known threat to the public at this time. And almost at the same time, Representatives Tom Keene and Milky Sherrill released similar statements.
Huh. So Yeah, if the governor made a statement, like, you can't just ignore that as a newspaper. I would think.
Well, that, but also the other way around, right? Like, how big does the story have to get before the governor is like, yeah, this is worth my time. I better say something.
Right?
Like, this
Yeah.
isn't just a handful of drones buzzing a house out in the middle of nowhere. Like,
Right.
enough people are calling and upset about it that he had to come out and say, like, hey, everything's okay. There's no threat. Um,
What is the minimum number of HOA complaint letters that have to
right?
come in?
Yeah. Now, interestingly, I mentioned I had to update this morning. I was on
Yeah.
Twitter and I found a new update. New Jersey Senator Douglas Steinhardt tweeted this morning. He said, "Today I delivered this letter to Governor Murphy demanding he organize and convene a joint legislative session where all 120 members of the state legislature may ask questions and demand answers from state and federal authorities into the ongoing reports of unexplained drone activity over our military installations, critical infrastructure, and residential communities. None of us should accept the continued stonewalling by our leaders and lack of transparency and accountability from our governments."
Nice. I definitely understand why they would be frustrated and want answers. Like, just saying that it's not a threat doesn't really allay fears that it could become a threat very rapidly.
Yeah. Now, I read that Twitter post and I thought, like, okay, this is kind of politics as normal, like they're kind of jockeying for position, but broadly speaking, they're aligned. They're all saying, like, hey, don't worry, like, we see the drones you're talking about and we're talking to the feds about it. Um, his letter gets a little more pointed than that.
Okay.
With all due respect, dismissing the ongoing and credible reports of drone sightings as nothing and no threat without offering detailed explanations as to why and how those conclusions were reached is not only dismissive, it is irresponsible and dangerous. As Commander-in-Chief of the New Jersey National Guard, you bear the responsibility of safeguarding our state assets and protecting our communities. Yet, your office has shown no discernible action to explain these reports, provide assurances to the public, or explain why such measures are unnecessary. This inaction raises questions about your office's commitment to transparency and public safety. By failing to address these issues publicly and thoroughly, your administration is fostering an environment ripe for conspiracy theories, misinformation, and public panic conditions that could escalate into dangerous confrontations and further erode confidence in your leadership and ours.
Oh yeah, that is like beautifully written. Like,
Mhm.
what I want to say is, oh, shots fired, but I would really like if we could avoid that kind of thing happening. Like, don't even want to introduce that phrase.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah. So now I don't know these guys. I'm not familiar with New Jersey politics. Maybe these
Yeah,
two just freaking hate each other and they
totally
take any
right.
opportunity to snipe at each other. This might just
Yeah.
be politics as usual. But what I'm seeing is the governor and several representatives immediately coming out and saying, hey, don't worry. We're talking to the feds and there's nothing going on here. There's no threat. And one senator coming out like, based on what? Like,
Yeah.
you
Give
need to
us some
say
more
more
info.
than that.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Now, again, this isn't just politics. We are seeing the response from agencies in the area seem to be taking this very seriously as well. NJ.com reported on November 22nd, the FAA said it had restricted drone flights temporarily over Picatinny Arsenal, where unauthorized flyovers were reported last month, and over President-elect Donald Trump's golf course in Bedminster. The FBI requested the flight restrictions, quote, out of an abundance of caution.
Yeah. Got to protect that golf course.
uh, More recently, NBC New York reported Congresswoman Nicole Malliotakis, I think that's right, Malliotakis,
Seems.
saying today that she is asking the FAA to impose a temporary drone flight restriction over the entire borough of Staten Island after sightings were reported there as well.
I mean, sure, but why? Like, what? Yeah.
So she explains in the letter she wrote the FAA, and I don't know if she got this restriction, but she asked for it. And she asked for it because NJ.com reported amid a string of unexplained nighttime drone flights over New Jersey, a medevac helicopter was unable to pick up a seriously injured patient last week due to drones hovering near the landing zone.
Oh, shit. Yeah.
Yeah. And she points out there are two large medical facilities in Staten Island, and we can't risk this. That's a fair reaction. But because of all of this, like, you can understand why law enforcement is taking this fairly seriously.
Yep.
NJ.com said the FBI is asking for the public's assistance in unraveling the mystery of dozens of recent nighttime drone sightings. By the way, dozens is a dramatic understatement in that sentence.
Right?
After 2 weeks of reports of drones flying at night over northern New Jersey, often in groups, the Bureau publicized a phone number and website for gathering more reports related to the recent sightings.
Yeah. I have worries about who has to staff that, but I'm more curious about why the FBI is in charge of the investigation.
It seems unusual, right? But it actually, there was an explanation provided on NBC that I think makes sense. They said the airspace is the FBI's domain. I don't think they actually mean the airspace is the FBI's domain. I think what they mean is like, it is like federal territory, basically.
Sure.
When the FAA sees something that is a potential violation of federal law as it pertains to the sky, that's a time where the FBI would get involved, especially if we're dealing with multiple counties. And we're talking about something that could have come from outside New Jersey. They want to have the ability to expand the investigation.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. So, like, at any moment, it could become multi-state, and the FAA doesn't actually have enforcement. So you need some other agency. But I guess I'm surprised that it's not military.
It is a little surprising. I know that there are some sort of restrictions on which military agencies are allowed to operate stateside.
Yes, that makes sense.
Yeah, if it's affecting Air Force bases, you would kind of expect the Air Force to be looking into it. But anyway.
Yeah.
NJ.com reported law enforcement officials from Morris and Somerset counties issued a statement urging people to send the FBI videos and photos of mystery drones they see in the area. This is what Chuck was worried about. The letter said, quote, while we currently have no evidence or information to indicate these drones pose an imminent threat at this time, their presence appears nefarious in nature.
Oh, nefarious. That's a good word. It's a very like New York or New York Times word.
We are asking that all residents be vigilant and report any drone sightings directly to the FBI at the phone number or email tip lines listed below. Photographs and videos are specifically requested and can be uploaded to the email address tip line.
I mean, it just seems like a big step. It's like one thing to investigate. It's another to just open those floodgates to public UFO sightings, blurry photos of lights. They must be super motivated to find out who's flying these drones.
Super motivated, but also I think it kind of speaks to the fact that they don't have better photos. Like, I would be surprised if the Air Force was like, hey, can y'all send us your UFO photos? And be like, you've got better gear than I do.
I hope.
Why aren't you sending me photos?
Right. Yeah.
The FBI isn't necessarily stocked up on, like, high quality infrared anti-drone tech, but like, I would still expect that they have interdepartment access to better equipment than random iPhone photos of blurry lights in the sky. So to me, that speaks to how seriously they're taking it, that they're like, if we can just get a clear shot of one of these drones, it might crack the case. And who knows, maybe the public has it. But
also,
like you said, it's a big step.
You get the feeling of like, okay, I've done a thing. Like, even if the result of that is nothing, at least someone is listening to me. And
you think maybe it's like a public pacification measure, like, hey, don't worry, we got it, send your photos here, we promise we'll look at them.
right. Yeah, like you're right. It could actually crack something. Like someone may have like a great infrared imager or something.
Yeah,
But
or that email box goes straight to dev null.
yeah, right. It's a no reply email address.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There, I've got a couple of these scattered in here, but
Okay.
I want to point out there was a claim on Fox News that is very dramatic and worth
Okay.
mentioning. It's very odd, and the only source is Fox News, so
Okay.
take
Good.
it with a grain of salt. Retired Army Lieutenant Colonel Chuck DeVore said some of the FBI agents that have been assigned to look into this have reported drones flying over their homes, as if to say, hey, we know where you are.
I feel like, haven't you mentioned something like this before?
Yeah, now this is getting into more of the woo-woo
Okay.
paranormal side of it, but all the books on Skinwalker Ranch talk about something called the hitchhiker effect, where people who visit the ranch and experience things there, the paranormal stuff kind of follows them home, almost like it's a contagion. Yeah, very strange. Now, I don't know if that's what this is, but it definitely kind of like any UFO researcher is looking into this is like, say what?
Yeah, right. It could just be the ducks messing with them.
True. Yeah.
Or that they made it up and Fox News never even bothered to check.
Probably more likely than ducks.
Yeah.
There are also a number of really interesting statements from the police themselves. Now, again, I would expect any police statement to kind of strike the same tone as the governor's statement. Like, yeah, we're looking into it. There's nothing to worry about. Everybody, please stop calling us. But they're kind of not. Fordham Park Police Chief said, he sent out an email, said, you may have observed or become aware of the various reported drone sightings in the airspace above Morris County in recent weeks. Morris County law enforcement, in conjunction with our state and federal partners, have been attempting to determine the launch point and landing location of these drones, as well as the people or entities responsible for their presence in our airspace. Several drone sightings have been reported above critical infrastructure, such as water reservoirs, electric transmission lines. That one feels like a stretch to me. There are electric transmission lines everywhere. It would be hard not to fly over an electric transmission line. Rail stations, police departments, and military installations. Members of the local law enforcement community have been pressuring our partners for answers regarding this activity, as their presence around our critical infrastructure is concerning.
I mean, yeah, this is actually like a really well-written statement. I wish that the governor had written this.
Yeah, because he's not downplaying it. He's like, yeah, this is concerning, and we are taking it seriously.
Right. Yeah, that's all we want to hear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I also... Sorry, go ahead.
So, like, this... I love that they're asking about the launch and landing spots. Have they made any progress on that in the last 4 years? Are we still...
Not even once. Yeah.
Okay.
Hold that thought, because we're coming back to it. But yeah, being able to track drones back to where they come from doesn't feel like a big ask. And yet,
here we are.
Yeah. Mark Chiarolanza, who is a spokesman for the Morris County Sheriff's Office, said, it's a complete mystery. He added that it is unlikely that the drones belonged to a recreational group, given that some were reported to be the size of a small car. The best way we're going to be able to figure this out is if someone can get a good solid picture of these things. We can't knock these things out of the sky. That would be dangerous.
Yeah, seriously. So, like, what I'm hearing is, please don't shoot at them anymore. Which really, I feel like that shouldn't need to be said. Like, don't shoot aircraft out of the sky. But,
Yeah. It reminds me a lot of when we talked about in the Colaris episode, like the guys who were investigating were like having to talk to the local residents, like, please don't shoot at the UFOs. Like, please don't let some nervous dude with a gun start an interstellar incident.
Seriously. Yeah.
The Evesham Chief of Police Walt Miller, describing the drone sightings in the area at an interview, said they were not like the normal drone that someone would purchase and use in their home. I assume he means for home use, not in your home. If you are flying a drone in your home.
Yeah.
He said they were large. Some were described as large as an SUV with blinking lights on them. We have no information of who the drones belonged to or what their purpose was. They seem to be larger than the hobbyist, and due to the number of them as well, we would classify them as most likely not a hobbyist that's out doing these. Last night was interesting just because of the wind that was present. One of these small hobbyist drones would not be able to fly. These larger, I guess, professional drone activity that was out there gave greater concern, especially in their ability to navigate the weather. They have to be landing somewhere. They're very large. And I know we're working with state police and federal authorities to try to figure that out.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, SUV-sized drones that aren't affected by wind is concerning. Yeah. And it's interesting to hear him say, like, they have to be landing somewhere. So, like, can't we follow them with an IR-equipped drone? Like, I know it's nighttime, but that mothership has to be emitting so much heat after that many hours of operation. Like, what is happening?
You just quoted like a third of the posts on Reddit. Everybody's like, will someone just fly a drone up to one of these guys and take a clear shot of it in the air? Stop taking blurry cell phone photos from the ground. There has to be someone with a drone in the area.
Seriously. Yeah, like a commercial drone. I mean, they're already up there. Like, let's go.
Right? Yeah. But again, after 2 weeks, no one has been able to do that. Now, again, you take this next one with a grain of salt. This is from an anonymous Facebook post.
Always good.
Which is claiming to be a leaked internal email from a police department. I think it is possible that a leaked internal email from the police department came out. It is possible that if I was working at the police department and I had access to a little more information about the drones that was being shared publicly, I might send it to a family member and it might end up getting posted on Facebook.
Yep.
But of course, buyer beware. Quote, here is the update we received through the FBI and the New Jersey State Police. Multiple reports of organized drone activity in Morris, Somerset, and Essex County. These events started approximately 2 weeks ago. The drones are varying in size from a little over 1 foot to over 10 feet wide. Initial intelligence is showing that these are military-grade drones that are undetectable by current U.S. technology. Blackhawks and other U.S. aircraft have been launched to try to intercept these drones. However, when they get into the area, the drones go dark and disappear. These drones have been reported to be traveling over 100 miles per hour and are capable of payload or weapon systems. The battery systems are like nothing we have seen before.
Yeah. I mean, so it reads like a military situation report or like a police
summary. Yeah.
Yeah. But a lot of that checks out. You know, I mentioned the Chinese have a supersonic drone, so 100 miles an hour would be cakewalk for that. The tilt rotor could totally do it. The bit about sending Blackhawks up there is interesting. That's news.
Yeah, I would say pretty much everything else they said has been confirmed by other reports, and I'm willing to accept it. That was a new detail. We heard about F-15s being scrambled in the UK.
Yeah.
It wouldn't surprise me to find out that military or police assets were scrambled here, but we hadn't heard that anywhere. And especially, it kind of answers the question we had of, if they are scrambling these things, why haven't we seen any of these things shot down, taken down, captured, intercepted? If they're going dark and just evading whatever we're sending up, that is even more concerning. We've now got a stealth SUV that can fly in, hurricane force winds. That ain't great.
Yeah. And like the ability to quickly get the drones back on board of the mothership and disappear is actually like really notable. On the other hand, if all we have to do is scramble a Blackhawk, and they go
I
away.
think you have fixated on the yes. You just send a Blackhawk, problem
I mean,
solved.
whatever.
I feel like you've fixated a little bit on the mothership thing.
Yeah.
It's really tantalizing. But to be clear, that report was from Colorado in 2019. We have
Hmm.
not heard the word mothership
Oh,
or like anything like that from New
okay.
Jersey or the UK. That doesn't mean it's not there.
Okay.
We still have the question to answer of where are these drones launching from. I remember when Langley happened, someone shared a report to a thing the Chinese developed for training exercises that was basically a drone ship that would launch other drones. And it was meant to go out at sea and conduct training exercises with other people.
Right.
So if these things are flying up the river, maybe they're coming from a literal mothership,
Yeah.
like downstream. I don't
Sure.
know. But just to be perfectly clear to our listeners, there have not actually been any reports of a mothership in New Jersey or the UK. I think
Fair.
Chuck
Yeah.
just likes it because it kind of like it ticks a box in his head, like, oh,
Yeah.
that's how you solve the range problem.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. It could be other things. It could be boat, could be all sorts of things. But like we do see, like there's China is doing a brisk business in drone-based fireworks right now, with tens of thousands of drones all going up in order to perform their light shows instead of using
That's awesome.
fireworks.
Yeah.
So getting drones off of boats and then landing them again is like kind of a thing. But also at the same time, the thing they don't talk about is the number of drones that end up in the river or on the
Yes.
shores has
Yes.
been a real problem.
I know you don't, but do you watch Skinwalker Ranch?
I think about it every time we talk about it, but
they bring out one of those groups to fly. I think they brought out 500 drones.
oh, that's
And
perfect.
literally what they want you to do is they have some information that there's some sort of field or distortion in the air,
Yeah.
like a mile up, and they want to investigate it. They've shown lasers through it. They've tried firing rockets through it. So they're like, okay, what we're going to do now, we're going to bring out these drones. They all have very bright lights on them. We're going to fly them up in a grid and literally just try to fly them through this
Blank
thing
it
and
through,
see if
yeah.
anything happens. And they send it up, and the footage of this is wild. The drones all go up, and then they just start falling out of the sky. like rain. It's wild. And it cuts to the drone operators in the tent, and they are freaking out, man. They're like,
I bet.
this never happens. Like, you get one or two like fail, but like like fully a third of the drones just immediately just plummeted from the sky.
Fascinating. Yeah.
But yeah, your broader point, I think, is notable that drone swarms, commercial drone swarms, are a thing for things like these festivals and stuff. And they do have a certain failure rate. It's not high. You don't expect to see this Skinwalker Ranch style thing. But if you put up 500 drones, it's reasonable to expect one of them is going to have a problem.
Right.
If you're launching them from a boat at sea, it's reasonable to expect a few of them are going to end up in the water.
Right.
We're not seeing any of the drones fail in any way. None of them have been recovered, which is, again, it's possible. This is not necessarily non-human levels of technology, but it's unusual.
Yeah.
Now, the thing we haven't talked about yet, we talked about the governor, we talked about the FAA, we talked about the FBI, we talked about the cops. The thing that I think is really interesting about this is, although these may not be like non-human craft, we are in, by every definition, a UFO flap right now. We've talked about these in the past where there's a wave of UFO sightings in a region for a while, and then they just kind of dry up. And nobody really knows what causes them or why they happen. But by every definition, that is what we are seeing right now. This is what those UFO flaps look like when you go back and look at the reporting from the time. And it's absolutely wild to be living through one of them and log on to Reddit every day and see new updates and like what is going on. This is continuing literally this morning I was updating our notes. So we are going through a UFO flap that is visible to the public, very visible.
Pretty cool.
And while I think it was worth talking about all the cops and all of their statements, The public eyewitness reports are really interesting, just again, because of the volume of them and the kind of unfiltered nature. Here's a quote from The Verge. They said, "The drones were captured on camera by residents in multiple boroughs in the state, mostly at night." To the best of my knowledge, they were all at night. I don't believe there are any daytime shots. Some images and videos shared in news broadcasts and social media depict strange winged aircraft that looked like small planes or, quote, car-sized drones. Others seem like groups of consumer-level drone copters.
This is like totally typical Verge reporting. What could I figure out just by reading Twitter and 5 minutes of research? So I
Careful, you're describing our podcast also.
No, yeah, I mean, and I put very little faith in our reporting abilities. No, I think we try harder than The Verge does. But anyways, yeah,
I will say this. I put this in here and Chuck updated his reaction, which is fair. You just got his unfiltered reaction. I like The Verge. I read it all the time. What I think is interesting is not necessarily how The Verge covered it. It's the fact that The Verge covered it.
Okay. Fair.
This is a tech news site, and they thought something interesting was happening here enough to talk about it. I mentioned this morning, the New York Times covered it. Like, we are seeing this get out to the public in non-UFO centered publications, which is fascinating to me. And that, again, kind of gets back to this idea that we're living through a UFO flap right now. It is absolutely wild.
Yeah. The last Verge article I read that I had serious issue with was they just like make everything bombastic. So they had an article about how all the Florida roads have uranium, like nuclear uranium in them now. And like you dig in for 3 minutes and it's like, it just evaporates, but oh my God, it's so like fantastic. And it's total garbage.
So is it like, there just isn't that much uranium, or is it like, it's technically plutonium? Like,
no. So I'll do a really short version. Basically, Florida does a ton of fertilizer extraction. And when you do that, you dig up a whole bunch of dirt, and all dirt contains certain amounts of uranium. When you pull out all the fertilizer bits, you're left with a significantly more concentrated bit of uranium. It's still very small. But the problem is we concentrate it over and over and over into EPA mandated stacks, which is literally just a pile of uranium enriched dirt. And the folks that have to maintain these piles petitioned the Florida government to say, can we do a study about potentially embedding this in something that is not leaking into the groundwater, like our roads? It is significantly less radiation than, the sun. Sure. But The Verge was just like, oh my God, uranium in all the roads. Like come on, do like a moment of research. So.
All right, moving on from Verge hate.
Sorry.
But the thing that I think was interesting here was, again, like their reporting, and what I'm seeing is there's video from like eyewitnesses, which is really unusual for this kind of thing. Usually, we go look up these flaps later and it's like, here's a 800 generation Xeroxed copy of a black and white photo of a light in the sky, and there's nothing. You can go look at the iPhone videos right now. Go to Reddit and type in New Jersey drones. You'll see hundreds of videos immediately.
Are any of them good? I mean, it's nice.
There's a lot of them. Most of the videos are of red and green lights at a distance in a black sky or drifting by over the treetops. Now, what I will say is what the videos do a great job of doing is making it very clear there are a ton of objects up there. They are all over the place. They are not behaving like helicopters. They are not behaving like airlines. They are not Starlink. They're not satellites. They're
Right.
they are drones, right?
Seem like
Like
drones. Yeah.
absolutely, they behave and look like drones. But there's a ton of them, and they're everywhere.
Okay.
So like someone put up a video, and they were like, "Hey, these drones are blinking out Morse code for ET."
Sure. Of course. Yeah.
Sounds very exciting, right? Well, it turns out E in Morse code is a single dot,
Uh
and
huh.
T in Morse code is a single dash. So
Yeah.
if there is any pattern of fast and slow blinking, the letters you're going to get out of it are ET. So it
Hmm.
does not blink ET, it does blink. Um, they have lights, which might be running lights, but maybe they're non-standard. But you can't see enough detail of the craft to tell for sure if they're not
Yeah.
standard. I've seen a ton of people on UFO Twitter and UFO Reddit going, "You guys, these are just helicopters." And they will post a similarly blurry photo of a helicopter showing its running lights. And it's like, yes, this one photo of a drone taken from this one location kind of looks like this one photo of a helicopter you found, but you're ignoring all the context around how the eyewitness reported it was behaving, where it is, how many of them. Now, I don't doubt some of the photos out there are mislabeled or inaccurate or photos of mundane objects, but there are a lot of photos of drones.
Yeah.
I hesitate to tell you to go look at them because at the end of the day, they're just blurry photos of lights in the sky and you
Yeah.
can't really tell anything from them other than, yeah, there's something there.
Yeah. I mean, there's a really cool one from 4 hours ago of someone chasing down one with a low light camera. It's
Yeah.
pretty interesting.
Um, Ovniologia, which is a Brazilian UFO website, put up an
Okay.
article about this. They said there have been reports of drones hovering over people's homes for hours on end. Other reports say the drones often cluster in groups of up to 8. Because the drones most often fly at night, it's difficult to gauge their size, but some describe them as being as big as a small car. There are often flashing lights, usually in a triangular pattern.
Yeah. That is creepy as hell. Like, why? What's the point of hovering over a residential neighborhood for hours? Other
Absolutely.
than
Yeah.
making people look. I don't know.
Right. And we mentioned earlier, the police saying, hey, they're hovering over critical infrastructure like reservoirs and
Yeah.
power
That
lines.
makes sense.
Sure, but also like find me a spot to hover a drone that is not near a reservoir or a power line. I mean, a reservoir you can avoid, but you know what I mean? Like, there are not a lot of spots that are far away from anything that could be potentially viewed as critical infrastructure.
Right.
But they are over actual critical infrastructure. We are seeing them over military bases. We are seeing them over nuclear missile silos. We are seeing them over hospitals, police stations, things like that. So
Yeah.
I'm not prepared to say it's not surveillance, but they're surveilling a lot of things that don't seem particularly interesting from a military point of view. So
Right.
the behavior is, again, very weird. And like you said, it kind of gets back to, well, maybe they're trying to be seen. I don't know.
Yeah.
One of the eyewitnesses, a guy named Phil Doyle, said it's not like 2 or 3 a night. It's probably 30 to 50 a night. A
Hmm.
lot of them seem to come from the Picatinny Arsenal area, which is just on the other side of the hill.
Yeah. That. I mean, that is pretty crazy. Like, I was kind of imagining single digits. So 30 to
Mm-hmm.
50 is pretty nuts.
Right. Like going back to one of the earlier quotes where they said, like, there have been dozens of sightings. There's been a lot more than dozens of sightings.
Yeah.
One of the people who's fairly well known in the UFO Twitter community, Klaus, lives in New Jersey and was tweeting constantly through this.
Sure.
Here's just a sample of the tweets that he put up in one night. He said, about 40 drones flew by our apartment in the past hour. A
Wow.
little bit later, he said, it almost looks like an invasion. A little bit later, he said, I have easily seen 100 drones by now. What the hell is happening? A little bit later, he says, it just seems like a drone parade. It's weird, but I haven't seen anything anomalous. That one was paired with a video where you could see from his house, he's showing these drones flying by over the tree line. And they're just
Wow.
one after another, going
Hmm.
past. It
Yeah.
it almost looks like he's in like a traffic area for the drones.
Hmm.
So he's pointing out like they're not behaving anomalously in that I'm not seeing any of the 5 observables, but there's so many of them. It doesn't make any sense
Yeah.
for what the explanation is. And then he tweeted, I still don't think people are grasping how many of these things there are. We are at the highest point in the area, and our bedroom window overlooks their flight path. We might not see them close up, but we see all of them. It's nuts.
Yeah. 100 drones in a night. That is pretty cool. Pretty
Right?
crazy.
It changes the scale of the encounter in your head.
Yeah.
You know, like when you're thinking 10 to 12 drones, it's kind of easy to imagine, you know, like a group of foreign operatives or even hobbyists, you know, if they got their shit together doing it. When we're talking 100+ drones night after night after night in multiple areas of the state, this is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
A guy on Reddit posted something I really liked. He said, with all the hoopla ongoing regarding the New Jersey drones, I decided to pop into the New Jersey sub and see what the locals have to say. I have to admit, the posts on this sub gave me the impression that the drone sightings were isolated to a few locations. After only 10 minutes of scrolling, I quickly realized this is not the case. In the last 24 hours, the drones have been sighted by locals in 29 different counties and townships.
Wow.
The important thing to point out here is the scale of these sightings. These drones are being seen over multiple counties simultaneously, sometimes moving in squadron formation.
Wow. So it's all over New Jersey.
And Staten Island. They reported that recently.
Okay.
So, you know, it was like, hey, the New Jersey drones are in New York now. As far as I can tell, they've only had sightings in Staten Island. But I haven't heard any reports from other surrounding states, but I don't see why this kind of behavior, whoever is behind it, would respect state boundaries. And again, it's ongoing. It hasn't stopped. So we'll see if it spreads further. The guy on Reddit went on to kind of summarize what he's seeing locals report. He said, extreme wind this evening has not affected flight performance of these drones at all, according to locals. Patterns have emerged in witness testimony regarding the drones. They include appearing as small fixed-wing aircraft ranging in size from a small car to school bus size, observed in groups of 1 to 10 at a time. Drones are either silent or sound like a leaf blower or lawnmower when close by. Locals report hearing these sounds buzzing their houses multiple times throughout the course of the night.
Yeah. So, like, large numbers, super quiet, flies for hours, surveilling an entire state all at once. that's a lot of observables. They're not really.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you see what I'm talking about, where it's like, look, I'm not ready to put my stake in the ground and say, you guys, it's aliens.
Right.
But I'm not so confident when someone's like, oh, it's Russia. Like, maybe. Yeah. But there's some questions we got to answer. If this is a foreign state actor, this is equally concerning because this is a big operation.
Yeah.
I got one more unusual claim from Fox News for you here. I loved this one. They said one family in Morris County who followed a drone in their car said that as the drone hovered over them, their car's clock changed time and only returned to normal as they drove away.
Yeah, classic UFO stuff, right?
Absolutely. Cars dying, electronics misbehaving near UFOs. We heard about that in the Betty and Barney Hill case. Mm-hmm. But that said, in this case, another Redditor said there's another plausible explanation here.
Yeah.
It said, this is a hallmark of traditional GPS spoofing technology, which is used as countermeasures against drones, missiles, and conventional aircraft. The question is this tech being used in an attempt to bring down these drones? If so, it seems to have little effect. Alternatively, these drones themselves may be employing GPS spoofing tech in order to disrupt our infrastructure in some way.
Yeah, totally. So it raises the question of like, do we know what countermeasures the military actually has or what the FBI has?
We have some sense of it. Now, obviously, we never know, like, what is the
Sure,
tip
yeah.
top, ultra secret, latest
Right.
military development, but
Right.
we have a fairly good idea of what they're capable of.
Okay.
Tommy Turner, who is a member of a drone piloting group on Facebook, said most military bases and sensitive government facilities have most military bases and sensitive government facilities have sophisticated drone detection and anti-drone technology.
We should put
While
this in the beginning as our warm up. This
Jesus
sentence.
Christ. While it might be possible to fly over or onto a base, it is very likely the drone will be disrupted, and if controlled locally, the operator's location pinpointed. If the drones are brought down, the resources available to investigate the origin are vast. There are examples of this type of technology at work in the Las Vegas Formula One event.
I want to know more details about this, in particular because one of the Formula One events recently, they actually had a camera drone operating next to the Red Bull car, and they had to special build a drone that could keep up with and corner as quickly as a Formula One car.
That's interesting. Yeah. So yeah, Liberation Times dug into this a little bit. Like, what's this about Formula One? And they said a company called Copters posted a case study explaining how they were tasked with protecting a Formula One event in the UK. They said, quote, multiple radio frequency and optical forms of detection were used to provide a complete solution to all UAVs. The technology was able to retrieve details on the drone's serial numbers and model. It also located its route, altitude, and speed, and it was even able to detect the individuals operating them. This allowed them to inform the organizers of any unplanned flight activity.
Sure, okay. But military drones, like commercial drones, operate in like unrestricted, unencrypted radio. Like military would be hardened against that.
Sure, but I do think it's worth pointing out that like a civilian drone basically has no chance against these defenses. And these are the defenses that are available to civilian events.
Right.
Liberation Times says other countermeasures available to the U.S. Air Force allow security personnel to take control of drones and safely land them so that personnel can take custody, as well as drone busters, which they describe as, quote, handheld non-kinetic mitigation device that can detect groups of 1 to 5 UAS and jam the signal between the drone and the controller.
Huh. That's cool. No, so like non-kinetic, this is not a gun, but they have like a high-powered radio jamming device or something. But I'm guessing it doesn't work on these drones, right?
Yeah. Liberation Times went on to say, concerningly, one Langley Air Force Base witness stated that their drone buster failed to register one of the objects, while another was unable to use a drone buster due to not having a visual.
Interesting. So, yeah, like, does the jammer have to like have a lock on it or something?
That's now I thought that was super weird. Somebody posted some details that made me think maybe this isn't quite as weird as it sounds. UK UAP said, quote, most UK counter UAS systems can detect, track, and identify drones using RF, radar, and optical sensors. These systems often detect communication between the pilot or ground control station and the drone. Likely, the drones in question are autonomous, pre-programmed with waypoints and mission plans. Autonomous operation eliminates active comms or GPS reliance, making jamming ineffective.
Yeah, okay, makes sense. Because like if you have a radio controller, and to like radio listeners, you can detect like where the actual like controller button is and also where the drone is based on who's broadcasting. But if it's fully autonomous, then you can't do anything. But usually fully autonomous relies on GPS, which can be spoofed or jammed.
That said, even if we accept, okay, you can harden these drones and automate them to prevent these jamming measures, there are still some open questions here. UAP Jedi said, the RAF protect our sky with a quick reaction alert squadron based around the UK to intercept foreign adversaries approaching the UK from flying into our airspace. This is augmented by radar stations that can spot these planes or drones from hundreds of miles away. So we should be able to safely say they haven't flown here from Russia. Were they locally launched? If they are, they would have to be relatively small and easily transported, and this limits flight time and range. To do this over several nights with utter impunity suggests a major national security issue at the very least. Even if these are not true UAP, the implications here are terrifying and cannot be understated.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, I know my answer, but I think the very obvious question to ask for most of our audience is probably going to be, why isn't someone shooting them down?
I think that's a very fair question, especially in the UK where they were over Air Force bases that potentially have nuclear missiles, right? Like
right, yeah.
the ones that are just kind of hovering over downtown New Jersey.
Right.
All right, sure, maybe you don't shoot those down. But, like if you're over an Air Force base, that's a clear violation, right? So a Pentagon spokesperson who was asked last month why the Air Force didn't shoot down the drones said, quote, any commander of any base has the authority necessary to protect forces, facilities, and infrastructure. I do know that with all of these incursions, given that it's on U.S. soil, there's another level of coordination within the interagency that needs to take place, but the commander absolutely has the authority to engage any systems that are a threat to base. Now, she very clearly felt like, haha, perfect, answer, nailed it. And the journalist immediately fires back like, wouldn't surveillance or intelligence gathering be a threat to the base? And she talks for a straight minute and basically just says, this is something that the department continues to analyze.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Not an answer at all.
Not an answer. Recently, Senator Gillibrand got a bit of attention when she seemed to imply that the bases do not have authority to shoot them down if they don't show hostile intent. So she said, quote, if it's over the base, if it's over a sensitive site, I want to create authority for them to take it down. An object that doesn't do anything, it's not showing hostile intent, but it's a huge national security breach. So we want to update the law to say this is a huge national security breach and we can take them down on that basis alone. They don't have to shoot at you. They don't have to drop a chemical weapon. They don't have to drop a nuclear weapon. You could just take them down because they're clearly spying.
I kind of have a hard time believing that that's really the case.
It feels weird, right? To think that the base would have their hands tied, that you can't shoot unless they shoot first. Yeah. And to be fair, everyone was kind of confused by Gillibrand's suggestion. She put up a bill proposing this law, but it seems like the bases already have this authority. So the assumption was that we must be missing something here. That said, as you hinted at earlier, there is a fairly practical answer to why you might hesitate to shoot down a drone over an airbase in the UK or New Jersey. Okay. Pentagon Press Secretary, U.S. Air Force Major General Pat Ryder said, just to put this in context, even here in the U.S., if there are drones being flown by hobbyists or some other entity, you want to make sure you're doing due diligence, not only to protect yourself and the safety of others, but also using appropriate measures in order to not inadvertently create a second or third order effect. Mm-hmm. In other words, potentially harming the civilian communities we operate in and around. Right now, the assessment is that these drones have had no operational or safety impact on our personnel at any of these facilities. We're keeping a close eye on them, and we'll take appropriate measures.
Yeah, okay. So this makes sense to me. The drones are not overtly hostile, but shooting them would drop possibly burning explosive wreckage on civilians.
Yeah. Yeah, I cannot imagine if you think people are upset that there are random drones hovering in the air for night after night, how
Right.
pissed they're going to be when the military starts shooting them down and my house got wrecked.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to be a lot more upset about
Right.
that.
Yeah. One of the proposed technologies would be hydrogen fuel cells, which
Mhm.
compressed hydrogen has a tendency to explode pretty violently. So, Scott, let's get to the big question. Who do you think is behind these drones?
Well, okay, there's a bunch of possible answers, and we've been dropping hints throughout this whole
Mm-hmm.
episode, but let's start by kind of going through a few of the possibilities. So, first of all, there was a really interesting quote recently from Senator Mark Kelly. He said, "We don't know who these drones belong to. My suspicion is a lot of it is hobbyists, but some of it is also very likely to be foreign nationals that are doing surveillance with low cost systems that are somewhat expendable. And it's hard to track them, and it's also hard to take them down. You could do a lot with a cheap drone. We see that in Ukraine every single day."
I do agree with that. That the amount that drones have played in Ukraine has been pretty shocking. Um,
Yeah.
but it is hard to believe that like 10-foot big UAVs are hobbyists.
Yeah. Stealth minivan sized drones with no clear launch or return point is a
Yeah,
little different than,
a little suspicious.
I strapped a grenade to a DJI and flew it into a tank.
Right, exactly.
Um, when he said this in an interview with Ask a Poll, um, they actually included a note in the article that said, while my assistant Andrei Bergovsky was transcribing this, he posted a note saying, "It's not really that easy to launch a hobbyist drone into a restricted airspace unless it's a self-crafted quad. Consumer drones have a map of all US restricted airspaces and a GPS to track movements into those. My drone won't even launch in the DC restricted airspace or above national parks. I tried, lol." So I'm skeptical about this whole hobbyist drone users above our military bases stuff.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah. Adding to this retort, a guy on Twitter named Brett said, "I unwittingly flew my DJI Mini in the vicinity of RAF Menwith Hill a couple of months back whilst doing a parking survey at a nearby business park. My drone was in the air less than 5 minutes, and within the hour, I had armed police pulling up on me."
Yep, that's totally what I would expect.
Yep. Justin Malveaux, member of a drone piloting Facebook group, said, "I don't think it's hobbyist. This is a lot more serious than flying over a stadium. You risk additional federal charges flying over a military installation. That's a risk most hobbyists won't take."
Yeah, federal charges for violating military airspace is no joke.
Yeah. And then just to put the final stake in the idea of it being hobbyists, Matthew Pines, who we did an episode about fairly recently, interesting guy, director of intelligence over Sentinel One, said, "The sheer number and persistence of the disruptive and mysterious overflights of such a sensitive military base, as well as the manifest failure of deployed counter UAS systems, is a serious national security issue. It is unlikely hobbyists could have controlled this many UAVs."
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like, can you get 100 drone pilots together and still avoid like angry cops and military for 2 weeks? Like, no,
Yeah.
it's yeah, I don't think so. So it feels like
This
foreign
is kind of the
adversaries.
thing we're dancing around the whole time, right?
Yeah, right.
Is it technically possible that a hobbyist somehow hacked their drone and flew it over a military base? Sure.
Sure.
Is it possible that 100 hobbyists did that, or that one hobbyist found a way to control 100 drones? I guess, maybe
Yeah.
stretching a little bit. Is it possible that they did this for 2 weeks in a row during crazy high winds and there was zero evidence, no one caught them, and nobody tracked them down? I don't buy it.
Yeah.
I think we can safely consider the hobbyist angle a dead end.
Yeah. It does feel like a thing that I could see like uh Google or one of the self-driving car companies like mapping out every street, but like I feel like they would check in at some point
Yeah.
and just be like, hey, you know what, actually we should have said something, this is us. Like,
It's always a
I don't know.
safe bet that a tech company is thumbing their nose at regulations. But yeah,
At any
this
given
feels
time.
like a step too far.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Okay. So, what about foreign adversaries?
Sure. So Ross Coulthart said, quote, these alleged drones appear to be operating with total impunity over the US and the UK over some very sensitive nuclear military facilities. So why would any foreign adversary state power deploy drones with overt running lights?
That's the question. Like, it's got to be a distraction, or I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe they're just not very good at their jobs. Excellent engineers,
Just bad
terrible spies.
spies. I had not considered that. Sure, that's a possibility. Former State Department analyst Merrick von Rennenkampf said the multiple consistent reports of bright flashing lights and formation flying suggest that some actor, be it a drone operator or otherwise, was putting on a show of impunity at considerable risk over a key military facility. If this was a foreign intelligence gathering operation, the brazen nature of the incursions makes it some of the worst collection tradecraft imaginable.
Yeah, right. So they like this. The way this is written makes me think, like, uh, the people doing this have a vested interest in making sure that they're seen, that
Mhm.
the things are too big, uh,
Mhm.
too battery full, too in formation, too uninterruptible. Like, this is a it's kind of like I don't know, just it's a different kind of tradecraft. It's not collection. It's
Yeah.
emphasis.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head. UK UAP said something similar. They said, our adversaries already have access to sophisticated surveillance tools like satellites.
Mm.
So, what would be the purpose behind such a blatant, overt demonstration? If these drones aren't carrying specific payloads for unique purposes, the intent is questionable. Nuisance? Disruption? Show of force?
Yeah,
Hostile recon? Psychological tactics?
psychological. Yeah, makes
Yeah,
sense.
it's interesting, right? Chris Sharp hammered this point home a little bit. He said, I can't highlight this enough. If drones or UAPs are above the bases for over 10 nights of incursions over the most sensitive airspace in the UK, the message is clear. The UK and the US are powerless for now and do not control the airspace.
Oof. Yeah, that's a uh, rough road to wander down, um, with the current state of the world, and
Yeah,
really wants to bring in some conspiracy theories that I don't really want to entertain right now.
no, for sure. Now, that said, there's still one big problem with the foreign adversary solution. I don't blame
Mm.
anybody who looks at this and goes, it's not alien. This has got to be
Yeah.
foreign adversary. That is a totally reasonable conclusion to come to. But you have to be able to think about the big question here. How are they getting in and out without being tracked? Um, Aerospace engineer Condor Man, who we've talked
Mhm.
about a few times before, said, when our bases in Syria are attacked with drones, we know exactly where they came from and launch counter strikes. Drones are not that hard to track. Something is amiss here, like it was with the Langley drones, unless they do know where the drones came from and are outright lying.
Oh, that's a really interesting possibility. But given how stressed everyone seems about it and how bad it makes us look, uh, if they could, I mean, if they could stand up and say it's Chinese or it's Russian, what rationale would they have to not do
Mhm.
that?
That's a really good question. And I think it depends on whether you think it makes you look worse to say, we can't stop these drones and we have no idea who's flying them, or we can't stop these drones and we know they're Russian.
Yeah, I mean, they're both bad. but, uh, but
Yeah.
maybe the worry is that the public perception will get out of hand if
Sure.
they hear it's Russian. Like if we hear it's China, it's like, well, shit, yeah, they're clever. But if it's Russia, it's like, oh fuck, this is happening.
Well, and frankly, we've talked about this possibility before, right? When we're talking about who's flying UAPs, the honest to God anomalous ones that we talk about all the time, the Tic Tac and stuff like that.
Right.
I don't blame anybody who's like, this is definitely a US Black Ops program. Sure. Yeah, this could be black budget tech that we just don't know about.
Yeah.
But why? Why wouldn't you announce that? Why would you fly it against your own forces? Like the behavior is very weird. And it always kind of comes back to, does it serve somebody to leave it ambiguous? Right now, it is undeniable that our military bases are being surveilled by anonymous drones. That's bad, no matter who's flying them.
Yeah.
But while it's ambiguous, there's a possibility that it's not a foreign actor, that it's aliens, or it might be something else even.
Could be ducks.
Could be ducks. Ross Coulthart put it a little differently. He said, why are Congress people being led to the impression that these must be explainable as foreign adversary drones? If it's Chinese or Russian, how are they deploying drones over U.S. military facilities undetected? Why have no people been charged? Why have none of these objects been recovered? The reason why these objects haven't been recovered is because, in a large number of occasions, they are genuinely anomalous. That is what I'm being told by my sources, that these do not constitute what you would normally regard as a drone. They don't have propellers, they don't have rockets, they don't have the kind of visible propulsion systems that you would be used to with a normal commercial military drone. So what the hell are they?
Yeah. So like, if they are alien, why would they look like quadcopters?
Yeah, or fixed wing aircraft. Absolutely.
Yeah, right.
Without getting too into the weeds, I will say there is a long history of a claim that alien craft can mimic our craft. You hear a lot about unmarked black helicopters that fly overhead, hover in place for unusual amounts of time, and make no sound. There's a famous sighting that we should probably do an episode on at some point called the Cash Landrum sighting, where they described seeing hundreds of military helicopters fly overhead. There weren't hundreds of military helicopters in the area. So what were they, and what were they escorting? What were they chasing? Why were they there? So I'm not saying that's what this is, but I am saying that in the UFO community, there's definitely a contingent of folks who are talking about, well, they don't behave like foreign adversary tech. And we have this history of potentially non-human craft engaging in mimicry of human craft as a kind of like cloaking mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows?
Yeah, that makes sense.
I can tell you're flagging. We're getting close here. Chris Mellon said, he kind of put it really well. He said, rather than acting like furtive spycraft, these drones are flying brightly lit after dark, seemingly without concern for detection or U.S. countermeasures. Some are even brazenly using spotlights to illuminate and perhaps film U.S. military systems. This behavior suggests that they are either trying to get our attention, trying to send a message, or they are utterly unconcerned by U.S. military countermeasures. Such a lack of concern may be reasonable, as nothing we have done to date has been effective. That's right, we have not managed to capture, disable, track to its point of origin, or identify any of these UAS, nor do any of them seem to have malfunctioned, which is also extraordinary given the number of drones in these swarms, sometimes swarms of 40, and the number of incidents and their duration, hours at a time.
Yeah, I mean, when you boil it down like that, it does seem like a big stretch. Even for, China and Russia, Russia especially, to create drones that never fail and can fly hundreds of miles into New Jersey, and we have no way to detect. But here's a question. Mm-hmm. If the lights are brazen, why do they only fly at night? Like, if they aren't worried about us and our countermeasures, why not fly during the day? If they want to be detected.
Right. Why weren't they flying at Thanksgiving?
Yeah, exactly.
There's a lot of open questions here. Look, if you asked me to put money on it right now, I would probably lean towards it being adversarial tech rather than non-human, right? As much fun as I have talking about the possibility that it's non-human, it's probably for an adversary. But the point that I'm trying to hammer home this whole time is none of the possible answers are perfect fits. It is not as simple as, it's obviously advanced Chinese drones. If it is, there are some big questions we need to answer about how they're doing this. But there's another possibility. It could be both foreign tech and non-human.
Oh, shit. What are you thinking about?
So both David Grush and Lou Elizondo have been saying this whole time that there is a crash retrieval and reverse engineering program. Lou has said famously that there is a Cold War of weapons technology, an arms race of who's going to crack the problem of how to reverse engineer the UAP stuff first. What if these are foreign drones using reverse engineered UAP tech? That might explain the light year advance while keeping the very human motivation of the obvious human style surveillance and human style behavior.
Yeah. Okay. That's not great.
Yeah. I'm going to sum this all up with Matthew Pines, who I think really hit the nail on the head. He got the perfect summary of the whole thing. He said, frankly, every available explanation is problematic. Adversaries making a mockery of our air defense, the U.S. government causing a civilian freakout by irresponsibly testing advanced tech over a civilian population, or non-human origin craft deciding that they don't need to be stealthy anymore.
That's true. None of those sound great. So I'm going to stick with, I still think it's ducks.
I like your explanation best. All right. Everybody, thank you so much for joining us on this very long episode of It's a Very Exciting Time. You can find show notes and more on our website, veryexcitingtime.com, as well as links to our Discord and social media accounts.
And you can email us at scott.or.chuck@veryexcitingtime.com. And if you'd like to support the show, please check out our Patreon at patreon.com/veryexcitingtime.
And Chuck, as always, my wife thanks you for listening to me talk about UFOs so she doesn't have to.